it really depends on your mental state. When you are consuming anything external than yourself, that might be reflected in the experience that you have with that. You need to be your own rock in that experience. You need to be able to have a control on your mind. It's either medicine or poison, depending on how much of it you're using, how frequently. Using things that are external to you are a path, but they're not the only path.
Hello and welcome to Curious Ones podcast by Yandara. I'm Yael Ginzburg, the host of the podcast, a yoga and meditation teacher and philosophy lover. Each week you will hear eye-opening interviews with the different teachers of the Yandara Yoga Institute, located in beautiful Baja, Mexico, along with other teachers that pass through here. This life-changing knowledge, shared through authentic, heartfelt communication, will help you live a happier, more fulfilled, and connected life. Let's dive in. Hello, welcome to Curious Ones podcast by Yandara. I'm Yael Ginzburg, and I am very honored to have a beautiful guest with me today, Adayna Janelle. Janelle is a yoga and meditation teacher, a Reiki master, sound healer, and co-founder of Soul School that is leading a teacher training here. And I've been just looking at all the girls in the training, you and your partner Sierra, who's been on the podcast already, have just had such a easygoing atmosphere. So I would love to capture that and keep going with that energy and vibe for this conversation.
Yeah, sounds good.
So when we were talking and thinking what would be a good topic, you kind of told me how you entered into the world of yoga, and I thought we have to start there. So could you tell us, please?
Sounds good. I guess I entered into the world of yoga officially during some cannabis yoga classes. And I really just was at this point in my life where I was starting to meditate and go a little deeper within myself, but I hadn't taken any big steps so far. And I noticed that my now partner actually was hosting these cannabis yoga classes, which was really interesting to me. I was like, pretty much cannabis, anything I'll do. So I guess I'm trying yoga this Wednesday. But yeah, I guess within that space of an already developed interest, I just found what the hype was back in the day. I mean, now I've discovered, I think, many more aspects of yoga, but back then it was just having that one 60-minute class a week where I didn't have to think about anything other than the present moment. And at that time in my life, that was a new concept. So cannabis really was the way that bridged me into this new way of thinking and being. And I'm happy that there's, cannabis classes. It was in Canada as well, so it's totally legal. And obviously there's different cultures with cannabis all over the world.
What I love is that you didn't even go to yoga because you wanted to go to yoga.
Yeah.
It was
like an activity to do with cannabis, like something else we can do while we're, having some cannabis.
That's really, I love that so much. And I think it's such an interesting path, but it just shows you that there are many ways to arrive to the yoga practice.
Totally.
Even ones that, as you mentioned before, are considered taboo. Can you explain what is a yoga cannabis class?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm sure there's many different ways to have a cannabis yoga class, but in the ways that I've experienced it or even taught cannabis yoga it would just be like a normal asana class. But before we begin, we would, you could bring your own cannabis, or usually sometimes I would provide like pre-rolled little joints with some other herbs in there or flowers. And then we would just have like a few moments before class where we would have like a conscious consumption. So instead of just lighting up and smoking away like most stoners are used to doing, we would actually take like one inhale, hold it in for about 3 breaths. Sometimes I would count, and then exhale. And then we'd have a few moments before we would even take the next puff. So we could really see how we were feeling going from hopefully sober to this elevated state. And usually we would only have about 3 puffs before class. We do another one. Little breath work, have like a retention, and then just like exhale and bring like awareness to different parts of our body. One more, and then we'd probably go inside and start the asana class. And then there was some time afterwards, obviously, for some more of the socializing and chatting about how we're doing, yoga asana and mixing it with cannabis and how great that is. But typically the conscious consumption would come before we would start.
So now that you have experience with, let's say, like yoga without cannabis and yoga with cannabis, in what way is the yoga with cannabis different?
I mean, I don't know if they could necessarily be compared. I think yoga with cannabis is a very beautiful practice. I think yoga without cannabis, also a very beautiful practice. Yoga with cannabis, for me personally, and obviously it's going to differ for everyone, and also what type of cannabis you're using. Is it the flower that you're inhaling? Is it, a tincture? Is it edible? There's so many different ways to consume. Also, like the dosage that you're using is really going to contribute to the type of experience that you have. But for me personally, like if I consume a little bit of cannabis before I, let's say, get into like a asana practice, then I would probably notice that it's easier for me to be present, kind of like it's easier to get into that stage of pratyahara, like the sense withdrawal, without, much time passing. Like all of the background noise seems to fade away and you're just right there in the class breathing with your own breath. I think it makes you more limber and opens you up more. I really believe that cannabis is a spiritual plant. It really helps you connect yourself to your more energetic body and states of being. The list, I could go on, honestly.
Could you go maybe a little deeper into really your relationship with the plant and in what way do you approach consumption?
My relationship with the plant, it differs because I'm traveling so often. Oftentimes there's places where I go where the quality of cannabis isn't what I would like it to be.
Where it's not legal.
Where it's not legal. And also, like for instance, we hosted a training in Bali and it's like the death penalty. So like definitely no cannabis, right? So it just kind of depends where I am in the world and also like what quality is available, because I'm not really like into like really low grade cannabis, there's a vibration that comes with the flower, just like anything, like the food that you eat, the literature that you put into your minds. And if it's not high quality, then it's not really doing you any good, I don't think.
Of course, it's like eating sugar from a candy or eating sugar from a fruit.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So back to your relationship with like how do you approach the consumption just in your personal life as a yogi,
totally,
as a spiritual person, just a person?
Yeah, of course. So let's say I'm back home in Canada, which I spend my summer and fall there, and cannabis is legal there. My consumption typically would look like, it differs every day, but if I was going to wake up and do my practice, maybe I would have consciously a few tokes before then, maybe before bed, maybe during a park hang by myself to connect maybe with like nature a little more, or just like have that deeper experience with the universe around me, because I do really believe that cannabis really connects me to like everything around me. It's so much easier to slip into that state of just like knowing that I am so connected to Mother Earth and so connected to the people around me. Personally, cannabis really taps me into my empathy and my heart chakra. And not in this way where it's like, my heart chakra is so open. It's like I'm able just to feel the people next to me and understand them and empathize with them, be compassionate with them, be kind to them. And it's not to say that I can't do that without cannabis, but I mean, just like any herb, obviously you could solve your tummy ache without peppermint, but if you choose to use peppermint because you know it works for you, then there shouldn't be shame or taboo, right?
Yeah.
But I think sometimes, like when we're talking about all the benefits and how we use cannabis, there's like that flip of the coin of like, well, you should be able to do that without it. And it's like, yeah, we can do it without it, right? But it's beautiful when we find plants that work with us and for us. And for me personally, cannabis works well with me. And I'm not saying that it works well with everyone, because it doesn't. And I understand like everyone has like a different mental state and even the way it affects them physically. But for me, it makes everything much better. There isn't usually times where I'm interacting with the plant and I'm like, wow, I wish I didn't do that. Like for a tummy ache, it's great. For not being able to sleep, it's great. For enjoying your food, it's great. For being creative, for all the different things, you know?
Yeah. You brought up a really interesting point that I've been actually asking a lot of people about. Because in general, you know, in the path of yoga, you're taught that you should withdraw from the senses or from anything that distracts you from the practice and anything that isn't real. And that only through basically meditation, you are able to reach the higher states of awareness. That's on one hand. And then there are many spiritual practitioners who use different kind of plants and substances in order to reach higher realms of consciousness. And I don't have much experience with like psychedelics and stuff like that. With cannabis, yes, but personally, I've been like kind of debating with myself whether it's okay to take a shortcut, you know, because we also know this saying, the only way around it is through it. You know, as in this spiritual path, you learn that you need to go inside of the pain or the struggle or whatever you're going through. So I've been asking a lot of people about this. I would love to get your take on this, because basically the question is like, do you think it's a shortcut? And is it okay to take a shortcut?
Well, I think I kind of want to touch on something you were saying about many practitioners using it. And also there's like so many accounts of like ancient rishis and sages who used cannabis in yogic culture and Hindu culture. And I think that kind of gets forgotten as well. But to touch on what you just said, I don't think it's a shortcut. I think it's something completely different than meditating without cannabis. And the two can't be compared. And I think that if they both get you to this end result, which is bliss or samadhi, or feeling oneness with the universe, then that's amazing for sure. I think that consumption is something that we have to look at, and it's like, and also our intention. A lot of people use cannabis to run away from their problems and run away from reality and kind of like put the mute button on the chaos. And for them, that's their medicine at the moment. But I do believe that if you're using cannabis intentionally and you're watching how much you consume it as well, I don't necessarily believe that it's a shortcut. I think it's just a different way of getting there. If I didn't have cannabis available to me, if it didn't grow, then I wouldn't use it. But because it is available, there will be times that I incorporate it in my practice. I also think that there's times where medicine can really help us fire those synapses and those pathways in our brain so that, you know, if we use cannabis, let's say 2 times out of the week for our meditations. Maybe going forward, we won't have to use cannabis as much because our brain knows how to get to those places of bliss and oneness, like on their own, you know, because we've already sent those brain signals there.
Yeah, I love that. I think that was such an important point that you made there about the intention, because we do hear like what the most common thing is to use cannabis recreationally, mainly unconsciously, unintentionally, and in environments that are, let's say, far from conscious. And as somebody who has been there and done that, I can say that the use of the plant wasn't beneficial for me. I felt lethargic and slow and disconnected, and I was definitely using the plant to run away from my problems. But now, after many years, I can say already on this spiritual path, I found that my usage has changed. And that's why when you mentioned this as like your entry point into yoga, I was like, okay, let's talk about this. Because I have found that it has become an entry point for me and kind of a glimpse into how it is to let go of the judgmental mind. And
the ego kind of fades away, right?
Yes, exactly. And like sometimes I have these things that I'm trying to figure out and make a decision about, and I can't. And then I usually
consume a little cannabis, and you're like tapped into your higher self. They whisper to you, child, you need to go apologize to that person, or you need to do this, and that's just your higher self, right? Like it's, or maybe it's the spirit of cannabis as well. But I mean, yeah. It definitely is a very spiritual plant, and I think a lot of answers come with it. But in the sense of like, it's giving you the time to, one, you're breathing, you're like, 2, you're probably in nature somewhere. It's like 2 factors, you've already removed yourself from your chaos and your stress. And then 3, you're putting this magic plant inside of your body. You're mixing it with fire, the element of fire. And it's like that whole equation is obviously going to be something amazing. You know, if you use it intentionally, if you have the intention to like, oh, I really want to understand this more about myself, or, you know, something came up and I'm going to go meditate on it a bit. It's the same. It's not the same. It's different than going to meditate sitting in lotus position and going and sitting on your back patio with cannabis. Different, but both will get you to the same place. I just don't think that they should be like compared, you know, like you can't really compare the two. They're just 2 different things. Like one is with a plant and one is without, you know? And I think also like, because now cannabis has been like, now we know the exact strain. We know how much THC is in it, how much CBD is in it. We're really breaking it down. It's mixing with science now. It's not just like some pot brownies that you have that you snuck out of your mom's, you know, whatever, however you got them. It's like this science. So if you're using it intentionally, and then you actually have this very specific strain of, maybe it's uplifting and creative, or, you know, it's easier to almost like regulate the type of experience that you're going to have, because it's not this question mark of like, it's like this mystery joint, you know, I don't know how I'm going to feel after. But I think with it becoming legal a lot, it's like easier to know the type of high that you're going to get when you smoke these days or when you ingest it.
I agree. Like, I think it's so crazy. We were kind of talking about this yesterday about plants being illegal. And I just think it's so crazy that something that nature created for us is considered to be illegal or taboo or dangerous, even when so many things that are legal.
Yeah, like alcohol.
Like alcohol, right? And like pain medication,
Mm-hmm.
which is becoming the worst epidemic in the United States and the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things that are legal and approved by the FDA
Mm-hmm.
are considered safe and again legal.
Mm-hmm.
And something that comes from nature is considered not legal and considered something that you need to hide.
Yeah.
Until
there's some shame around it too, right? It's
mm-hmm.
like, but if I was using like arnica for my swelling of my knee, no one would say anything. No one would be like, oh, you're using arnica. But if I'm using the CBD, there's taboo around it. And that comes from the cannabis plant. But really, it's like, it's such an intelligent plant, you know? Like every plant, there's so many different uses for it. It's not just for one thing.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, there's been times where we both have just used it for one thing. Our intention was probably to like escape or just to get high, but it's such an intelligent plant and it comes with a consciousness. So when you start to tap into those different intentions, like for instance, psilocybin mushrooms, I think we've maybe all had, not maybe all, but those of us who have experimented with magic mushrooms, probably the first couple of times we tried them, we didn't even understand about intentions. And so our intention was just to have fun and trip out. And so that's what we did. But then as we get older and like there's more education now about psilocybin, we understand like, this is medicine. Like it actually shouldn't be abused without an intention. It should only be taken when it's needed. And when you go into a ceremony with that intention, it really influences everything that happens to you for the next 7 hours. And it's a completely different experience than when you were younger, when your intention was just to have fun. Yeah. Because of the consciousness that comes with the plant, right? It's and integrating our consciousness with plant consciousness is such a privilege, really, because you're literally putting Mother Earth inside of you and you're like, tell me your secrets, you know?
So much wisdom. For sure. So for somebody who wants to start, maybe we need to say like we're not doctors, we're not
definitely not.
This is just like two
chicks chatting.
Exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah, so you know, like if somebody wants to start incorporating plants in a more conscious way in their spiritual path, how would you recommend for them to do it?
So yeah, just to reiterate that I'm not a doctor or a specialist. But in my personal opinion, I would say probably starting with, I don't know, it just depends really. You could start with a really, really light edible, like something that's like 0.02 milligrams per piece, which is like literally nothing. And just seeing how you feel with something so small and going up from there and treating it like how you would with other medicine. You don't just start big. You wouldn't just buy a big old joint and smoke the whole thing and then, you know? Or even with smoking, I think that just one puff of like a lighter joint that you've asked a friend about, like, hey, can you vet this cannabis for me, who maybe already partakes regularly? And if they say like, yeah, this is a safe strain for you to use, then just like maybe one puff. And that's it. And that's all you can start with. It's the same as like wine. If you drink a whole glass, the first time you drink wine, you would throw up and feel really sick. But if you just had one sip, it probably would help you get into your body more and feel more loosey-goosey. And at that small amount, it would be medicinal. So I would say just go slow, like as slow as you can go.
Yeah. And for me, it's really like, I think it's important to say my current practice with cannabis, I don't really like practice yoga with it. Your story was the first time I heard that that's actually a thing, I have to admit.
Those Canadians.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it exists in Israel. In Israel, it's still illegal. I mean, you can get a prescription for it, and it's not that hard to get a prescription, but you can't just go to any place. I've never heard of a cannabis class. Maybe I should start one.
Yeah, we would also do cannabis sound baths, which were like our specialty. And that was, we would do the same conscious consumption in the beginning. And then they would lay back. We would make like, we had so many pillows in our yoga studio, and everyone would have their own spot. And then we would do like a guided meditation through the chakras and play all the sound bowls and a bunch of instruments and take them on a journey. And obviously like a sound journey without cannabis is amazing, but with cannabis, it's extra melty. Yeah.
Extra melty. I like that. That sounds incredible. And what I wanted to say is that like my personal experience is that I really enjoy consuming it by myself when I'm not affected by other people and I'm not thinking, because sometimes when I'm with other people, I get kind of like in my head, I'm like very self-conscious. The Mexican.
True. Yeah, the Mexican, yes.
Finger. So like I really enjoy just when I have a night off and I know that I can just chill, I take a shower, I make like this whole evening cup of tea with my journal.
Totally.
And make it this evening with myself of like maybe
ritual,
ritual, exactly. Like maybe I'm asking a specific question, I'm trying to understand something, or maybe just as a point to connect more to my inner power, which I'm actually something that I wrote here because you have been speaking about like paths to accessing our internal power.
Okay.
So cannabis could be one of them. Are there other paths that you have learned throughout the years?
Yeah. Well, I'm a Reiki practitioner, and I feel like Reiki has really changed my life in more than anything else that I've ever encountered, more than cannabis for sure. I mean, if I had to pick between the two, it would be Reiki for sure, 100%.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Why?
And I mean, Reiki is all about, accessing your personal power and being confident and I believe it's truly about serving your community, Reiki. And it is this path to yourself and to understanding others. It's really provided this whole different way for me to be human, I think. And that's obtuse, but I think it gave me purpose was the main thing. And I think I really was lacking purpose before I was introduced to Reiki, and I had always heard about it. And I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, which is like very tight Christian cult.
Very strict.
Yeah. So even like growing up, cannabis was very taboo to me, and that was taught. And it's something I kind of had to like peel the layers back with myself. But when I was introduced to Reiki officially, I learned about it and I was like, wow, that's one of my purposes. And I believe that, serving your community is one of those paths to finding yourself truly, or being able to connect with everything. And that's like one of the paths of yoga, karma yoga. So yeah, I love Reiki. It's a beautiful, beautiful modality, and it's really like, it fits into anyone's life. It doesn't matter where you're from, who you are, what your religion is, what your ideas about God or the universe are. It really just helps you learn more about yourself, your energetic bodies, and gives you the power to heal yourself and help channel healing others, energy for others.
Hey, I'm quickly interrupting the episode to extend an invitation. If you are interested in deepening into any of the subjects we talk about on the podcast, we offer many different experiences on our beautiful grounds here in Baja, Mexico. From 9-day modules such as sound healing and yoga nidra, to breath and meditation, as well as 200 or 300-hour yoga teacher trainings, and many different shorter retreats. Check out our website, Yandara.com, to see all the information about the different experiences. Let's get back to the episode. In what way did it help you learn more about yourself?
I mean, before I had ever learned about Reiki, I didn't really know what the chakras were. It helped me learn more about like the meridians and energy pathways, and just the fact that if something's happening on my physical level, that there's probably an imbalance within me emotionally or mentally. And just, it really gave me more knowledge than I had ever really learned about myself in school or just through real world experience. I was like, wow, this all really makes sense. And I can apply Reiki to every aspect of my life every day, every moment. Like I can incorporate Reiki in my food, talking to people, walking down the street, being with myself, being with others, swimming in the ocean. There's always healing energy to channel. There's always ways to bring balance to myself. And Reiki really does preach balance. And that's balance in the mind, balance in the body, balance in the emotional states.
Mm-hmm. And how, maybe for a person who's not really familiar with Reiki, I can say that I'm not very, very familiar. How does that happen?
How does the balance come about?
Yeah.
I think once this healing vibration is in and around you, that's what brings the balance. And I mean, Reiki essentially is what we have that the gym won't cure or vitamins won't cure. Like I always ask my people who come in for a session when they're like, well, what is Reiki? And I'm like, okay, I'll break it down this way for you. Like, what do you do when you don't feel safe and secure in your body, or you don't feel like you belong, or it's hard for you to take up space? Root chakra. What do you do when you don't feel sensual, sexual, creative? You don't feel like your zhuzh, your mojo is flowing? Sacral.
Yeah.
What do you do when you don't feel empowered, when your ego or your will is affected and your backbone's too strong, or maybe there's no backbone? It's their solar plexus, right? The gym doesn't help that. Vitamins don't help that. Right. Journaling doesn't always help that. And like, again, with the heart, what do you do when it's hard for you to receive love or give love or connect to those around you? When it's hard for you to speak your truth or to manifest things like quickly to you, bring the things that you want into your life closer to you. When it's hard for you to connect to your intuition and that little voice in your head that's telling you, bring the umbrella today, or don't go down that dark alleyway, or whatever it is, right? Yeah. Or if you're not connected to God or the universe or to everything around you. And so Reiki is a modality that will help us with all of those things. It brings balance to our life. So it's easy for us to give love, and it's easy for us to receive love because we're feeling balance in our heart chakra. And sometimes we don't know how to give this specific love to ourselves, so we look for it in others. Sometimes others don't know how to give us that love. So where do we fill ourselves up with this energy or this love or this, what it is that we're lacking inside? And it's a healing energy that we can channel, all of us, that we can allow into our energetic field. And that's what I think it helps with, all those things. It really brings balance to how you feel as a human in this human experience. So you don't experience these really high highs and really low lows. You're just kind of like in the middle. You're not one day like frantic, the next day sad. You're just coasting, feeling good, feeling balanced.
Sounds ideal.
Yeah, sounds ideal.
Is that what learning how to channel and work with Reiki energy brings to a person's life?
Yes, it really does. It also brings so many blessings, like Reiki and like the abundance factor, like the money, go really well together. Like when you're ready to serve your community, I mean, being a Reiki practitioner isn't something that everyone chooses to do, because you are working in others' energies, but you're serving that person. So you can ask the universe for what you need to take care of yourself so that you can continue to serve your community. And that kind of goes hand in hand with like the yogic principles. Like, obviously we want to be humble and have moderation within our lives, but we also need to take care of ourselves so that we can continue to serve our community, especially if that's like our only thing that we're doing, and we don't also have like a corporate job on the side,
Yeah, which it might be hard for
healers.
Yeah,
Totally.
Yeah. So when you speak about really this abundance and connection from the universe and really in connection with service, which I like that you mentioned a few times already, because I really do believe that that's the only path that we can take in order to truly live a harmonious life.
Totally.
How do you advise for a practitioner maybe going through this shift from maybe the more corporate world into the more
holistic world?
World, thank you. In terms of really abundance, supporting ourselves, and keeping the element of service true, because if you need to support yourself, you might kind of compromise on the element of service.
Totally. I think it's important for people who want to make the transition, and I always tell this to my students and my clients who tell me that they're thinking about this. It's important to go slow. It's not something that can happen right away. It's not something that can happen in a matter of weeks. I mean, just like any small business, if you start to want to switch over to like a more holistic practitioner's role in your community rather than being like the banker in your community, you're starting as a person who's self-employed, who has a small business. It's going to take a lot of work to get that business off the ground. So you do need to still be able to take care of yourself, provide for yourself, and pay for your rent. And just, don't be delusional in thinking that, oh, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to be a yoga teacher, I'm going to be a Reiki healer, and everything's going to be fine because the two go so well and together. Like, no, we still need to be grounded in this world. We need to take care of our physical body. And it's great to have higher developed chakras and be up in the ether and dreaming about what could be and being able to channel these. But at the same time, like, if it's not paying your bills and you don't have clients that want that from you yet, like, you cannot quit your job first. You have to take care of your physical body. I think that you can keep your hours. Like, practical advice that I would give someone is keep your job, but start to create some infographics and videos. I use an app called Canva, so I call them Canvas, but create some Canvas that are like advertising yourself, make a new Instagram account, make it, start to put yourself out there so your community can see that, oh, Janelle's doing this different thing, like, what's going on? You can create some buzz in your warm community so that you can start to book maybe practice appointments or just appointments with people who are already in your community while you're still working at your job and paying your rent. And eventually it's going to equal out where you're getting so many referrals and you're starting to make so much money at your self-employed job that now you want to work less at this job because it makes no sense. You work an hour here and you make $100, and you work an hour there and maybe you make 30. So it's like you start to see that your time is more valuable elsewhere, and that's when you would make that switch, when it's quite obvious that you can't spend more time in your secular job because your business is providing you with way more than that could. I think it's a slow transition, and I always tell my students that. I'm like, please don't quit your job. Like, you should be able to pay your rent and put food on the table. And I believe that, like, the universe will also reward decisions that you make that are responsible like that, instead of just having this blind trust, kind of like stupidly.
I completely agree. I think that's very smart advice. And I think it's also a way to kind of maybe test it out isn't exactly the right word, but try it out and see how it is for you, because you don't really truly know
exactly
how something is until you really try.
Totally. Yeah, it's important. And also just like taking that time to still keep your job while you're doing something else. It's like you have this whole network of people that like probably don't have a yoga teacher or a Reiki healer, so you would be their yoga teacher or Reiki healer. And you just cutting that off and being like, I'm quitting this is actually like you're shooting yourself in the foot, because it's your warm network. These are people that know you and trust you and love you, and they're going to go to you before anyone else. So if you say like, hey, I'm running this special, I just became a Reiki practitioner, I need people to come and help me out, like, it's super discounted. It's $40. I'll book you in for next Thursday. Like, you're going to do a great job. They're going to refer you to these people. Like, it's a way to build your business while you're still doing that.
And I find that when you're truly aligned on your path, the right opportunities, the clients, the people, the situations, and the financial abundance that you need in order to support yourself.
Just like
exactly. I mean, you do have to put yourself out there, and you have to do the canvas and the infographics and tell people that you're doing it. But once you are really truly aligned with your path and where you're supposed to be, it happens so effortlessly.
Totally.
But then comes the point where you're trying something and it's not effortless. It's, you know, that you're trying something, it's not working. What do you do in that point?
I think you have to try many different things. I think, like any small business, if you only try to do your restaurant one way and it doesn't work, then, I mean, maybe you're not meant to be a small business owner, because entrepreneurship is hard work and it's consistent work every day. So yeah, if maybe your canvas aren't working, maybe you have to personally pick up the phone and call your aunt and be like, hey, Auntie Linda, come over and do some Reiki because I need your demographic of referrals. Like, it can be something different that you try. But I think it's important to just keep trying if you decide to be like a wellness practitioner, because it's not something that just happens overnight. You do have to kind of prove it to your community that this thing that you're doing isn't just like one and done, you know, like it's something that you're passionate about. And when people see you on the same path for a little while, they're like, oh, you're still doing that. Wow. You know, and if you truly are passionate about it, it's also going to come through you. Like, people will be able just to see that, and they will want to pay you to tap into that sacral chakra energy, that creative life force energy. So yeah, just keep trying. And I think another good piece of advice that I always give people is just to talk about it a lot. Like any business, every person you meet, you have to somehow bring up Reiki and be like, you know, maybe Reiki could help that. Or I was doing Reiki the other day and maybe they never heard about it, you know? So it's like, the more you talk about this thing that you love and that you're aligned with, the universe will be like, all right, I see you.
That is so true. You know, I saw this video on Instagram a few months ago, and it said, like, when you're doing something, don't talk about it. Like, only talk about it when you're ready to bring it out. But at first I was like, you know, I was thinking about it. And then I realized that it's totally untrue. The only way I've ever called into my life the things that I want has been by simply talking about it to everybody who will listen and just kind of starting the movement of the energy.
Totally.
And then it comes knocking on my door.
Yeah. And you never know, one of those people that you talk to might be like, that's in alignment with me. Like, let's help each other out, you know? I need Reiki.
Definitely. But, you know, for me, it's been like really funny. I think it's useful to hear maybe these stories. I've had already twice that I was looking for a partner in doing certain business activity, you know, wellness.
Yeah.
I wanted to do a workshop that it was like a lecture and a yoga class before. So I told it to my therapist. I told her I want to do, and she was like, what's the problem? Just post on Facebook that you're looking for a partner and look and start talking to people. I did that. I had a few respondents. I even had a few meetings with the people who responded, and I told them about my idea. I started talking about it. And then that same week, one of my students came to me in a class. We're not friends on Facebook or anything like that. She came to me in the class and she was like, listen, I have a lecture. I'm looking for a yoga teacher. I want to do a workshop.
Wow, and she didn't hear about that?
She didn't hear at all that I was doing it. Cool. So I looked at her.
You caught her with the vibration, right?
Exactly. Yeah, my jaw dropped. And I was just like, I couldn't even, I was like, at first I was like, I'm so shocked, but also this is how it works. So it's like, makes sense.
It does make sense.
2 weeks ago, the same happened. I'm right now looking for a partner in a specific field that I want to develop. And
unrelated, a friend of mine wrote me a text. I have a friend who just finished doing this and this. She's looking for partnership in this field.
That's crazy. Wow.
You know, and it's like,
you're like a master manifester.
But I only believe, like, I don't know if that's true. I feel like we're all
we are for sure
manifestors.
But some people's throat chakra is more open. Like they can lasso things back to them quickly, right?
I never considered myself like a master manifester because I just heard this concept that there is design manifestation and surrender manifestation.
Haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah, I just heard it and it makes sense because some manifestation processes talk about like you need to describe it exactly, you need to feel the feeling of having it, and you're calling in something specific. And the other version of manifestation, which I always was like, what's the right path? But I guess both are possible, is that you're just open to whatever is of the highest good for all and you allow what needs to come to you.
Yeah, I think that's mine.
Yeah.
It's like more like obtuse.
Exactly. That's how I always connected to it. Like it was always, whenever I wanted to manifest something specific, like I felt like it never actually came.
Sure.
But when I wanted, like, but I would manifest the things that I wanted, but it wouldn't be how I thought it was going to be. So I never considered myself like a master manifester. But what I realized is that the more you talk about what you want, the more you start this rolling of a wheel of energy of drawing in that thing that you want.
Totally agree.
So I do believe that talking about it is really important. I just got like super excited.
Yeah, no, it's so important. Like it's the only thing you can do. Is like, I think that's one of that's like the biggest trick that we have in our bag, is that anything that we say, we can call towards us, you know? Yeah. We don't need a wand. We have a voice.
Exactly. You know the spell abracadabra?
Yeah.
Have you heard that it's like in Hebrew, actually?
What is it again? I did read it a few times, I think on a meme somewhere.
So abracadabra in Hebrew literally means I'll create as I speak. Evra ke'adabra.
Evra
ke'adabra.
Ke'adabra.
Exactly.
Cool.
It literally means what I speak, I create. Or I create what I speak.
And we grew up being like, abracadabra.
It's magic.
Yeah. I believe in magic.
I do believe in magic as well. For sure. But I think I also, to like kind of highlight something that you said, is that there are many paths. And if one path isn't working, it doesn't mean that you should give up. Like try another path.
Yeah, definitely. You have to as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So you have been in this entrepreneurial world, which is so interesting because we go into this world wanting to be healers, but we must learn how to also be an entrepreneur. What have you learned about yourself through this process?
I've learned that, I can do anything. I can learn anything, and that even though I'm capable of doing everything, I can also put down the heavy things. I think that was a big thing for me to learn, was that, yes, I can do it great. I have a lot of Virgo placements, so I'm like...
the details.
But I think, a lot. The entrepreneurial process has allowed me to let other people carry the weight, I think, especially with Soul School.
What do you mean?
It's been an interesting process of, instead of trying to do everything myself as an entrepreneur, realizing that I do have the support of my community at this point, and like allowing them to do the things that they shine in instead of me doing everything. I think that is a really important lesson to learn. Yeah. But with Soul School specifically, I think when me and Sierra had this vision, it was like, cool, we'll do this thing. But then there's so much back-end stuff to do. Like in the process, I became a graphic designer, website designer, like sales, a specialist,
marketer.
Yeah, everything, like all the things, you know, like customer service relations, like troubleshooting.
Yeah, accountant.
Yeah, accountant. We have an accountant, thank God.
Wow.
But like the basic numbers and stuff,
Exactly.
yeah. So you just wear many hats, and
Mhm.
I think that entrepreneurship really teaches you that you have many facets, and you don't have to present yourself as one thing. Like, yes, I am Janelle, and I am yoga teacher, and I am Reiki master and sound healer, but I'm 1 million other things, and I can easily now take off one hat and put the other hat on, and there's no shame in that. I think it's important as humans that we realize like we're ever changing, and we have this ability to shift in each moment.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just realizing that we can do anything that we want, and that we put our mind to, and we can call in our dreams close to us.
So I really would love to go into, because I think this is important when somebody is like starting off on this path and want to become a healer.
Mm-hmm.
What else do they need to know? Like, what are the behind the scenes that we don't show on Instagram? And,
Totally.
you know?
Yeah. I think some of the behind the scenes are some things that I notice. The shadow side of being a holistic practitioner is that, myself included, I'm guilty of this. It's something that I struggle with a lot, is serving my community before I take care of myself is one big thing. Sometimes people will learn something and right away want to teach it instead of taking the time to integrate it themselves, and just like throw themselves in that teacher role. But it's like, it's wonderful to be a student. Yeah. And we are students our whole life. So even if we do carry certain titles or whatever it is, like we still are a student of life. And I think that sometimes people forget that when they first get into it. They kind of let their ego consume them. And then it's like these layers of breaking down your ego as you are this practitioner that's holding space for others. You need to make sure that we're always learning and like keeping humble ourselves. I think it's really important.
Totally.
And if we can come from a humble, like heart-centered place, that people will be able to sense that, and they'll be like, wow, I want to be near you. I want to learn from you. And you don't have to do so much. I think a lot of people, let's say for Instagram, they'll only post like the love and light parts of their journey. Because who wants to post all the dark and shadows? But even just like having like authentic conversations about it with your community, your friends, your family, and not pretending like, oh, now because I've done my YTT, I'm enlightened and I'm so happy all the time, and look at my yoga on Instagram. It's like, no, like tell them what you're going through. Let them know that like what healing actually means. And people will be like, oh, wow, that's so deep. Or like, wow, I didn't know that you were going through that today. And they'll relate to you more than they will if you're being, you know, kind of what mainstream media designates as what it is to be like a holistic practitioner, what they look like, what they sound like. Do they smoke cannabis? I don't know, you know, just like being as authentic and raw and real as you can, I think is what's important. And if that's like not in your nature, then trying to make it more of your nature to just like be authentic.
Yeah. I mean, that's important. Doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur or not at all. But I think that's such an important point that you touched there, because once you step into this role of a teacher, you could get, and I have definitely been guilty of this as well, like you could get this false perception that now you need to have everything figured out. And it's so far from the truth.
Totally. I think even like a couple years ago, I don't know if I would do this interview with you about cannabis, because I didn't really know how, like I was confused, and I thought that if people knew that I smoked cannabis, that would make me less of a healer or less of a channel or less of a, like, that was like my internalized shame that I was projecting onto others. And like, I wouldn't share my story as much, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just important to stay true.
So what was the shift in there?
The shift was, I realized I just did some hard reflection, you know? And I realized like, why don't you, because the thing is like a lot of my students come from Canada, 90% of them. So when we're doing yoga or other things, like I'm not smoking cannabis, but when we're back in Canada, like maybe I'm going to smoke cannabis with them because we're just in the park, or now we're doing like a cannabis yoga class, and it's like a different dynamic. And I realized like you're allowing some people to see this side of you, but then you're not allowing others to see this side of you, which is just you. And like maybe I'm someone that can break down some of that shame for other people, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more we talk about the things that are taboo, the less taboo they are.
Totally. And I mean, if we're talking about like the people who used to sit up in the mountains, these gurus and stuff, they like, there are so many accounts with ganja there with them. So it's like, let's honor the tradition in its entirety, you know?
And just before we walked over, I picked up the book Be Here Now by Ram Dass, which is a very meaningful book in the development of consciousness and spirituality in the Western world. And I was like flipping through the section that he has on psychedelics, and he was talking about the pros and cons. You know, there are pros and cons. It is something that is external to us, and at some point we want to learn
the process has to become internalized without the medicine, right? But
it can open the door, it can help us access, it can grow our appetite to access these places. Like there are great things. There are also things maybe you can speak about, like what are things that one should at least be aware of and conscious.
I think that you know, it really depends on your mental state when you are consuming anything external than yourself, whether it's spicy food, cacao, cannabis, psilocybin, whatever it is, alcohol. Like it's like where, like the starting point that we are inside, that we start from, is important. So if we're starting from a place where we're feeling really low, or we're feeling not that great, then that might be reflected in the experience that you have with that. If you're really, really sad and you have half a bottle of wine, you might not have a great drunk. You might be crying the whole night. That will be projected into the experience that you have. And same thing with cannabis or psilocybin. It's like starting from like a strong mental place, I think, is super important. And not just like throwing yourself into these worlds when you don't even feel okay by yourself to start with, you know?
I think
you need to be able to bring yourself back. You need to be your own rock in that experience. Even if you're with people or you're not with people, you need to be able to have a control on your mind and say, hey, I'm okay. Like this is an experience that I'm having. It doesn't have anything to do with me and like my true self, my soul. Some of the cons could be just like, I think some people could have mental breaks, which is probably the worst thing that could happen when you take anything external and put it into your body, is that it could really screw with your mind a lot, to a point where, you know, maybe you're not the same anymore. And I don't think that's going to happen from one puff of cannabis or like a microdose of mushrooms, but again, intention, consumption, and like your environment is all going to contribute to what type of time that you have.
I guess it's also, I mean, I don't know if we should say this, because I don't think doctors are going to advise anybody to take cannabis, but maybe consulting a professional if you have a doubt.
Totally. I think so. It's important. Also, like if you work with like naturopaths and things like that, like there's so many different types of medicine people available to us. And if you want to consult with like a typical doctor or go to a walk-in, it depends also what country, and they're going to tell you different information. If you're in the States and you're in, you know, this state where it's completely legal, the doctors might say, yeah, that's great. I can write you a prescription. It'll help with this. Here are the cons. But if you're in the state over, they might arrest you for even asking about it. So I think it depends too on who you're asking and what their perception is of what you're doing. But yeah, there's also like now a lot more studies being done with cannabis and psilocybin. You can even be parts of like a like a monitored psilocybin not experiment, but study that they have like integrative specialists and psychologists and things. So there's different options available to people, I think, if they want it to be in like a more controlled way.
Yeah. So I think for me, like the important thing to say is that, like anything in excess, it can be harmful, be conscious.
Or poison, right?
Yeah.
It's either medicine or poison, depending on how much of it you're using, how frequently. Even peppermint tea, if you drank it all day, every day, 7 days a week, maybe it wouldn't be medicine anymore. Maybe something else would happen and it would stop curing your headaches or your tummy ache. Something else would happen because now it's becoming, you're using it in excess.
Yeah. So Janelle, this has been really interesting and informative, and actually very freeing to speak about these things, you know, and especially that we're recording it. But I like it. I think more of these types of conversations should be out there. Is there anything else that you think is important to add or say, mention?
Yeah, I'd say that, like we touched on already, using things that are external to you are a path, but they're not the only path. And in the end, if we do have nothing, if we're by ourselves, there's no plants, we should be able to feel these feelings that we feel when we're using these external substances. I think it's important just to cultivate that sense of self and like togetherness by yourself, and not need to rely on anything other than yourself, even though I am an advocate for cannabis and yoga and other things. But yeah, consumption, intention, and just remembering that there's so many ways to find yourself and to find your purpose. Yeah.
Great. So just to wrap up this lovely conversation, I always end the podcast with the same question. What are you curious about right now?
I am curious about... What am I curious about? I heard the name Montauk Chia, and he does like lots of like energetics and tantra, and he's really like a master for women and men to hone their sexual energy. And I just heard his name, and I think he's so much more than that, but like I heard his name and I was really curious. Like sometimes you just hear a certain person's like, and he's like an incarnation, I think, of probably someone else, and he's an old man, so I'm very curious to learn more about him. He has like a seminar or something in New York coming up, so I might check that out. Yeah.
Cool. Let me know.
Yeah.
Well, Janelle, thank you so much. This has been so lovely.
Thanks for having me.
Now, after this time to nurture your mind and your spirit, we invite you to take a moment to consider others. A kind wish might come to mind. Know that what we learn becomes more valuable when we apply it and share it with others. So share this episode on Instagram stories, tag Yandara and I, or share with a loved one so that more people can benefit from it. Our hope is that the search will lead you home to who you already are, to what was always there. We'll be back next week with more inspiration, honest conversation, and insight into the energetic world around us. Thank you for listening and watching.